Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Art of Creation show, where we look at how choice creates, and different possibilities for creating a life and a living that can actually work for you, whatever that is for you. And I'm so excited. This is our finale episode for season 3. Yay! And what better being to help kick off the close of one season and to propel us forward into the summer and pre-pave the way for an awesome next season than one of my favorite rebel solopreneurs and creators, Christel Crawford. Christel, thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. This is fun.
Awesome. Cool. Well, it looks like we have a lot of people jumping on. Great. If you missed it in the beginning, if you have any questions, comments along the way, please just pop it in the chat. And then if you have any other questions at the end, we'll address those too. Christel has a super colorful, dynamic, amazing, collecting all of life's experience past, which is super fun. And I don't know if you've been looking at the posts leading up to the episode this week, but one of my favorites, of course, I think was on Tuesday. And she shows you the gamut of what life can be like in her world. And really, you know, I see that as part of the gift that you be and what you bring to us. And how this energy of being the rebel, you know, it's not like going against the grain just for the sake of it, and yet it's about being whatever you are, even if it doesn't fit into the mold of the straight, the narrow, and what we should be and do. So can you share with us what being a rebel creator has been for you and what has brought you to where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, to sum it up, I think it's really just choosing to create in a way that works for me. And that is something that I constantly discover, you know, so it's not even this thing where you discover it once and then that's the way you create and then that's it, you know. But choosing really even to create my life in a way that worked for me was one of these things that was really rebellious. I didn't know how to do it. That was the other kind of rebellion. Like, you're supposed to, according to some people, you know, have a plan and know what you're doing. And pretty much everything that I've ever really been successful at, I had no idea what I was doing, you know, when I started. And a lot of the people that I talk to are the same. Like, they have this sense of things that actually takes them farther than any plan ever would. And then they just rely on themselves and their capacities and their things, even if they feel freaked out at the time.
Yeah.
Most of the people that I know that manage success or create success have done it in a way that I think a lot of other people would think is by the skin of their teeth.
Yes.
You know, where it's unreliable and risky and all these words that we use to describe following what you know.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, there's so many different levels that we can look at this and play with this. And, you know, we can take it really, really big and cosmic and energetic and, like, you know, multiversal. And then we can also look at it as, like, you know, you're doing a home improvement project and you're like, I'm going to change the color of the walls in my bathroom. But then you're going to buy the paint and suddenly you see, like, this toilet paper holder that you really love and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm actually going to change the color of the paint because I want to have this now. So you're changing the color of the paint, and as you're going to the paint aisle, you see this, like, light fixture and you're like, you know what, that would be really cool, let me add this. And by the end, you have something so different than what you had anticipated creating when you first walked into Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever. And, you know, suddenly it's so much better. And if you had just said, no, I'm getting blue number 529 and that's it, then yeah, you would have achieved your goal. You would have ended up with that paint on your wall. Or would you have actually created and had the whole process of creating the new bathroom that you actually desired? You know, we can look at it, you know, in something so seemingly small, simple, mundane, every day. And then also look at how we apply that to our lives and some of the bigger asks and the bigger creations that we have. And I know one of the things that you've created is a 6-figure business while traveling around the world, loving up your man, having an amazing time, visiting friends, playing. So, I wonder, so at what point did all this start to click into place where you realized, this can be about a bathroom remodel, and it can also be about all of these things that maybe I never really thought was possible for me, as you were starting out?
I don't know if it ever totally clicked. I think what started all of it was this real desire, like an intense desire to have a life that really worked for what I wanted to do. And at the time, I really, really, really desired intensely to travel around the world and go to access classes. And that's for me what started this whole creation of a different kind of life, because I realized that if I was going to choose that, it didn't work to choose to work in a restaurant for 6 or 7 days a week. I was actually running the restaurant. Well, I couldn't do that and travel the way
Yeah.
So I had to be willing to go off any path that I knew to have what it is I wanted to have as my life.
Yeah.
And that was really the thing that I think that's always been the thing that's driven me, is like, I want a life that be like this. And sometimes a lot of times all I have is a sense of what this is. I may have run into a certain person and I got a strong download of kindness and nurturing and fun. And, that may be the thing that I take into the rest of my life and my business and all the things that I'm creating, going, I'd like to have more of that,
Yeah.
So new people will show up, or new choice of possibilities will show up, or, and but I think that's been the biggest thing for me, is like, I'm not willing to conform my desires to the things that are already in my life. I'm willing to change all the things that are in my life to have my desires.
Yeah.
And I'm also willing, I guess, to not know exactly what they are, definitely not how they look, but I know I have certain clues. And so I go on those clues and I just keep moving forward with the choices as they pop up, or the awarenesses as they pop up. And then sometimes I make choices that are shitty, and then I get awareness from those too, So,
Yeah.
but that for me is the driving factor of really having a life that is worth living. There's a question in the Bars manual that goes, what energy, space, and consciousness can me and my body be to create a life worth living with total ease? It's like, I'm not really willing anymore at all, and haven't been for a while, to just muddle through. Like,
Yeah.
I want to love what I'm doing and love what I'm choosing. And I don't all the time, we've all got our moments, but generally speaking, like, have it all, whatever it all
Yeah.
is for me.
Yeah, and I hear when you're talking about this, it sounded like there was some sort of a shift that occurred. You said you were going along, and then you suddenly realized you wanted to be able to go to more access classes, and it sounds like there was a bit of a shift there. And for those of you who are watching that are not familiar with Access Consciousness, it is a body of work with many, many tools for assisting lots of different ways of being, ways of thinking, getting you out of a lot of stuck thoughts, feelings, emotions, and behavioral patterns. And Christel, what was that for you? Like, how did you become aware of these tools? And, what was that process for you when you were like, I would like to have more of that? I know you had been already dabbling in a bunch of different modalities and energy practices and spiritual pursuits and things like that. And then sounds like it was something different for you. So what was that? What was that for you? What was your experience?
Well, I found Access Consciousness at a time when I had just kind of come out of spending a couple of years on, I'd say, getting my feet back under me. When I was 36, I was married for the second time, and I got really, really suicidal. And there was no Access Consciousness at the time. And so I basically hit my all-time low, and I just made a new friend who ended up introducing me to this lady that did this other modality. And so I'd spent 2 years like seeing her almost 3 times a week. And she would clear emotional stuff for me doing this thing. And I changed my diet, and I went on supplements, and I basically, pulled out all the stops that I knew about to try to be happy, because emotional stability was the phrase that I would use, and I just didn't know how to have it. And so that started me, that helped a lot. And then my husband and me at the time moved far away from her. And so I was a little bit desperate because I'd been really relying on her and the sessions to
Yeah.
keep me from falling apart. So so I didn't know anything about ask and receive, really. I didn't even have words to a question that I was asking, but I energetically started just pulling. I was like, what else is possible?
Yeah.
Like, what else is possible? And I remember saying to myself, there just has to be a way to be happy without having to see a professional 3 times a week. There has to be a way. I know other people do it. Like, how do normal people do this is something I would find myself saying, you know? And so it was probably like 2 weeks later that I ran into my old friend from Bible school, Marnie Baranko, who's also now a certified facilitator with Access. She actually runs most of Access. And she had Access Consciousness listed as her employer. And she and I had completely lost touch, but we had always kind of vibed back in the day. And so I was curious, so if she's into this, you know, what's going on? And so I Googled it and then was confused. And then I Googled it again and was still confused. So it took me probably 2 weeks of just Googling going, what the hell is going on with this thing?
Yeah, what is it?
Yeah, where do you start? What do you do? And so I finally found a facilitator's website out of London, Ontario, which was like 2 hours away from me. And I emailed that exact question. I'm like, what is going on? Where do you start with this thing? And that was that was when she introduced me to one of the first tools that we talk about a lot in Access Consciousness, which is what's light for you is true for you and what's heavy is a lie. And so she said, well, there's many ways to start. You could start with a session, which is a bar session, which is 32 points on your head. So it's a body work thing. Or you could start with a class. Like, which one would be lighter for you? And I had no idea how to use this tool. So I did this where I put my hands out in front of me and I'm like, I guess the session's lighter. So I chose a session and it was Juna Getter, who's a certified facilitator, 3-day body class facilitator. She ran my bars. And she told me at the beginning that I could either just lay there and receive the bars, or if I had anything else I wanted to change, I could ask about it. And I had so many questions. We changed thing after thing after thing after thing. And I got off that table and I think I weighed 5,000 pounds less than when I went in. Yeah. I mean, I felt like I was floating.
Yeah.
And so for me, I don't think, everybody has their own experience when they first get their bars run. Some people don't notice a change for like the first 10 sessions and then all of a sudden it's like, holy crap. And some people's first session is mind blowing. I don't think I would have lasted for 10 sessions. Like I actually required it to be mind blowing. And so I just created that for myself. And so I got off that table and because it was so mind blowing and the changes that we changed stayed different, I had like 3 or 4 more sessions and then I took my first bars class.
Yeah.
And then I took my first foundation. And that's kind of a little bit of a long story, but I say all that to say that I didn't know what I was looking for when I was looking for it. And this is the thing I just want to encourage all of you guys that ever watch this that are seekers that you can find. And there is something out there that, you know, for me, Access has been this thing that has not only like given me the tools to change my life, but it's like given me language for things that I always knew, but I didn't know I knew and I didn't have language for. And in that way has been so empowering. Yeah. So just don't give up and keep tugging on that thing that you know has to be out there. It is.
It is. So you've used it for your personal life. You've used it for your business. I mean, as though they're not the same, but we'll just pretend that they're different categories.
Yeah.
And then you work individually with people and offering these bars body sessions, and then also verbal facilitation and coaching. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I also noticed so it'll be in the show notes when this is posted to YouTube with her website, but she has a ton of freebies on there. She has her blog that has a ton of really great articles. She has her podcast or show that you can listen to, and then also a lot of other freebies and things and classes. And I saw that you have the Rebel Solopreneur class program, right? A three-month program coming up. So yeah, what was the inspiration behind that creation, and when does that begin?
Yeah, soon.
Yeah,
That's
cool.
all I got. Um, I as I was diving into creating my business as a certified facilitator, as a coach, I had to learn everything. I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about online business. I didn't know any, I knew bits and pieces about business, but I just had to learn it all. And so I've done a lot of the online trainings and webinars and things that talk about, the structure that you can use to get your business to do the thing that you really want it to do, and blah, 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 blah.
Heavy light, heavy light.
Yeah.
Ah.
And some of it was great because it gives there's information there that you didn't have. A lot of it I tried, and it just didn't create for me in the way that other things could with a lot more ease. And I've been looking and asking, like, what could I create an institute in the world that doesn't exist yet, that would invite people that function different to trust what they know, to access what they know, to create business in the way that only they know, that they don't even know that they know.
Yeah.
And that's really what Rebel Solopreneur is about. I see it as a bigger thing down the road. Right now, it's starting out in its little phase, whatever that means.
The seedling.
Yeah. And so right now, it's going to be a 3-month small group VIP group coaching thing with me and other creators, where we really, really, really play with the tools of question and choice and possibility and contribution. And we play with it in ways that allow and ask and receive, like, what does that be like in business, and how can you apply all of that to what you're creating and what you're aware of? And I could just kind of riff on that forever, but that's the gist. And it's hi, Steph.
Yeah, hi.
All of you guys.
And Maxine. Yeah. Lots of fun people hopping on. Thank you for being here.
Yeah. So that's really the gist, and I'm doing it in 3-month bursts because I find I've done so much business coaching, and I still do all the time, and I've done 6-month thing and 1-year things and ongoing things. And one of the things I find about creators like us is that we want a short thing so that we can do a thing, so that we can go on to the next thing, and if you want more, then you can have more.
Yeah.
But really, like, honoring the way that we all function, which is like, okay, now we're on to the next thing. What's next? So
yeah,
I'm to play with it.
Cool. So yeah, that sort of let's go, let's create, and then let's actually see what it looks like when we bring it out into the world and play with it in the world and manipulate it a little bit and tweak it and throw it out and see what comes back, and then say, okay, now let's go for another round. So what are some of the things that you can share with our viewers who are listening to this and wondering, how can I apply some of this magic to my life? And am I a rebel creator? And if so, what could that actually mean for me? And where could I start? Just like you had asked, where do I start with this thing? Where can we all start with this thing?
This sounds huge. This is like, it's going to sound like, oh my God, how do you do that? But it's really truly getting a sense of what you want your life to be like. Yeah. And I didn't really know how to do that in the beginning. I didn't know what that meant. And I had to sort of do something that we talk about a lot, or a lot of us talk about, is, I had to shop for realities. I had to go kind of looking around and poking and hanging out with different kinds of people and trying different kinds of business ideas to find out what was actually true for me, what really worked for me, what lit me up, what made me happy, because I'd spent so much of my life fitting in or trying to fit in to a marriage, or to a marriage plus this job situation, or to that church, or to this thing. Like, I'd spent so much energy trying to fit myself in that I hadn't expended any energy trying to know myself and what actually made me tick. I hadn't put attention there. And so I would say that one of the first things to start exploring is like, hey, what's really true for me? Like, if I didn't, and one of the ways I play with this, there's a lot of different ways you can do this, is if I could fire all my choices today, all of them, like my choice for a husband, my choice for kids, my choice for this house, my choice for clothes, if I could fire every single thing that I've ever chosen up to this point, what would I change and what would I choose?
Yeah, what would I
hire?
hire?
What would I bring back? Like, what actually works for me out of any of this stuff that I have in my life right now? And you may find that, like, you don't want any of it back. Or
Yeah.
you may find that you want, that you want pieces of it back or whatever. But all of that's going to be good information. And if a lot of what you've chosen so far is not something you'd bring back, then you really literally just go, okay, so where can I start with changing it?
Yeah.
And that sounds huge and simple at the same time, but it's one of those processes that really does start to get you in touch with you. What it is that really you would like to create. We're not ever asked that question. We don't even ask ourselves that question, really. And if your whole life it has been your creation and can be your conscious creation moving forward, and conscious just means aware, awake, in it, in the game, consciously choosing, what would you change? I'd start there.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah, and when we do have that sense of what we'd like to create, sometimes I'll even dial it back and just be like, okay, today, right? Like if for the rest of my life is too big today, what about just looking at today, and what about looking at the next 6 hours, or what about looking at the next hour, the next 10 seconds even?
Next 10 seconds, exactly. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. And just having that permission, to be able to have it be more flexible and fluid and malleable, instead of there being that one right thing, right? Like, what do you want to create with your life? And if you go to that thing of choosing the one right thing that you now have to create for all eternity, that can kind of, Stephanie's on last fall, we had an episode about the perfection trap. And this is a primo example of where we can get kind of tailspun into that kind of a situation. You were going to say something. Oh.
Yeah. Oh, I think, yeah, no, I love that you said, looking for that one right thing. Cause that's exactly not what I'm taught. And I thank you for saying that. Cause I get how I did that for a really long time. I looked for my purpose or the meaning or what I was actually here to create. That was where I went with that.
Yeah.
And when Gary Douglas said, what if the purpose of life is to have fun? I was like,
all right.
That's not significant enough. I judged that. I was like, have fun. Who cares about having fun, right? And, I find 5 years later, 4 years later, I'm like, hey, what if the purpose of life is to have fun, So it's really more just getting a sense of what you'd like your life to be like. And that, developing your muscles of sensing instead of thinking is a whole thing in and of itself.
Yeah.
Because we trying to go, you're right. We do try to find the right things to choose. That's how we're raised. That's how we're taught.
Yeah.
Like that's, whether you were religious or not, right and wrong and good and bad are the functional elements of the way we're supposed to be in the world, apparently.
Yeah.
And that's not actually you. It's not even the way you function. And it's definitely not the way you function best. And so there is, every single tool that we give you an access, or that I've been given an access, has been to empower me with what I know as opposed to what's right or wrong.
Yeah.
And that has been one of the biggest gifts. And so, one of the questions you can ask yourself is like, what do I know here? Like, what do I know that if I've been refusing that I know, denying that I know, pretending that I don't know, that if I would allow myself to know, it would give me total clarity and ease. And then literally just starting exactly what you said, Rebecca, like choosing in every 10 seconds, just, okay, well, I don't know, but I know I'm going to put my right foot in front of my left now.
Yeah.
I'm going to do my left foot over here, and then I'm going to go have a coffee, and then,
Yeah. And then you're continuously having new situations and new inputs and new things. And when we keep choosing, it's like, if you turn the GPS on while you're in your driveway and you don't move, okay, you'll never be off course, but you also will never get anywhere. So, and you pull out and you go the opposite way of the GPS, then it's gonna tell you, hey, by the way, if you actually, if you're looking for something else, like, you might want to turn around. And we get all kinds of information all the time about when we are, whether it makes sense or not, whether what we're choosing is creating greater, whether it actually works for us or not. And so when we get information of like, this isn't working, like, or, or whatever is showing up, it's like, okay, it doesn't really matter what it is or why it is. It's not working. So what else can I choose right now? And every time that we choose something and there's more space, Or, you know, or if you're enjoying and it's the same space and you're like, okay, cool, I'll choose more of this. Or I'd like to have something even greater, create greater, or experience greater, have more of whatever this is. You know, as long as we're continuing to choose and it's that, then great, keep going. And if you suddenly find yourself in a, you know, okay, great too, that's information. And now what can you choose again that brings you closer to what actually works? And that's that whole piece of choice creating, right? I mean, we can say your point of view creates, yes, because how, like, whatever you use to govern the choices that you're making, of course. But ultimately, what you choose creates what shows up. And so if it works or it doesn't work, you are never disempowered in that moment. You're actually empowered to choose again. So
unless you disempower yourself by judging yourself, which is
also a choice. Which is also a choice.
Yeah. And that I think that's probably if there was the biggest trap that we as creators create for ourselves is we use our choices to judge ourselves, you know, whether or not we did it right or wrong based on some person's idea of what right and wrong is.
Yeah.
And I'd say, you know, the tools of access have probably helped me with that almost more than anything else. We talk about allowance, where everything is just an interesting point of view, and the practice of that, the working of that into your life as you are choosing, as you are moving forward, has to be this really conscious choice almost in every second of like, okay, that's just an interesting point of view that I have this point of view that it's wrong, or you know, that's probably more than anything, getting myself out of my own way in that way has been, I'd say, probably the most active part of getting my life to where it is right now, and also moving forward.
Yeah, I liken it to if you have the point of view that you only like blue, and then you move through the world and you're only willing to see the blue things. Well, okay, great. You'll discover a lot of blue things, I'm sure. And yet, what of all the other things, all the red things and the orange things and the yellow things? And if we can just eliminate that point of view and allow everything to come in, now you actually have access to all of the possibilities, not just the blue things anymore. And again, the choosing thing, it's just sort of that tool of like, hey, what am I creating, and is it working? But yeah, I'm gonna also include the link to we had Heather on the show earlier this season and included it back then too, but the link to the Interesting Point of View group. So so if you're watching and you're not familiar with this group, the link will be in the show notes. And it's an open group, and you can go there, and it really is. Christel posts videos, Heather posts videos. They co-created the open group, and it really is it's really about starting to get a sense of what points of view you have about things that may be coloring the choices that you're making, or maybe coloring what you're creating or what's showing up, and being able to become aware of it and acknowledge it, and then not judge it, simply see that it's there, perceive it, and then have access to making the choice to release it and to create a different way of being that doesn't require that limitation to be in place anymore. So is there anything you want to say about that group too, or is that it for that? Yeah, right.
So it's just a really fun little Facebook group where we called it A Year of Interesting Point of View, and we don't post, it's irregular videos, but there's enough in there that you can watch and really start to get a sense of what the tool itself could create for you. And
and there are a lot of people posting there too. And what I find with the group is really interesting, because even if you're not a super active poster, or even if you're a little shy in groups, what's really neat is you will see where people are posting a point of view that they've now become aware of, and they're like, oh, interesting point of view, I have this point of view. And it's not to be like, oh, look at me, I'm bad, I have this point of view. It's like, look at this, look at what I discovered, look what I was able to shine the light on in my basement today, and now I get to air it out, and it doesn't have to haunt me anymore. And so when we see what other people are posting there, lots of times, at least in my experience, I see that, I'm like, oh yeah, wow, I can give that up too. How cool. I didn't even know that was in my basement. So it's just kind of this really neat way of engaging with other people and kind of, you know, airing out your laundry together. So, you know, it's not about, you know, a place. It's not like there's really no need to like be upset or have a story about it. It's really just like, hey, this thing popped up and I'm ready to change it, just by acknowledging it and being willing to just have a new energy about it and to choose something else. So we'll have that link in there too. So Christel, what else? I know, actually, I wanted to bring up the email that you got, and you know, about, you know, what do you think about all this free stuff you're giving away, right? I mentioned before you have a ton of goodies on your website, and you were being asked, you know, like, should you really be giving all that stuff away? And I love that quote, right? Like, the more I give away, the more I make. And you know, whether in business or just every day, you know, that's sort of a huge possibility there. Do you want to speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, there's this really prevalent point of view in the business world, or at least in the online business world, that you give away just enough to give people a taste and you save all your best stuff for the paid things. And I was functioning from that for a while. I don't know how long, but I was trying to decide, and this is where we use judgment to kill our business and our life and all things. But you know, I was using a lot of judgment to try to decide whether or not I should talk about this, because I was giving the thing away and then people wouldn't pay me, and there was just a lot of like calculating and computing going on when I would do a video or something. And I don't know what changed it exactly. I mean, I've been on a number of, you know, I've been in a lot of classes with Gary Douglas and a lot of calls. And, you know, in one of them, I remember he said, I've given away every tool I've ever created, just given it away, and I keep making more money.
Yeah.
And I just looked at, and this is that thing of looking at what's light for you is true for you and what's heavy is a lie.
Yeah.
You know, I looked at the space and the lightness in that for him, and I tried that on for myself, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'll have that reality.
Yeah.
And space and lightness is not something that you can cognitize or explain even to yourself. It's not something that anybody can validate. It's not something you can share with your friends necessarily, unless your friends are epic, you know, and can perceive energy. But it's one of those things that only you can know. Only you can know what you're choosing and what that creates. And so I just chose that I just chose that as a reality. And I started just, you know, doing my weekly videos and not even thinking about whether or not I was giving too much or saying too much, and asking. I mean, I play with asking, what can people hear? That's something you can always do with anything that you're creating. What can people hear? And at the end of the day, I may over deliver. I may be, there's all these possible things that could be going wrong. But if you ask a question of like, is this creating more? And you get a yes, that's all you have to know.
Yeah.
You don't have to go into all the details and pick yourself apart and try to find out where you could be doing better. You just get a sense of it and move forward. And so, and it is true, like that when I started my show a year ago, I'm into season 2 now, year 2. And I didn't start it for 2 years because I was afraid I wouldn't have something to talk about every week. Now you can't get me to shut up. So
I hear you, sister.
Yeah, I know. And so anyway, but after I started that show, where I do give away a lot of stuff, like you could, even with Gary and Dane's videos and all that, like your videos, you could change your whole life with the free stuff on YouTube. Yeah. You wouldn't ever need to pay for a class.
Yeah.
And that's just true. That's just really cool. And I told this lady that, I'm like, hey, listen, you know, you could change your whole life with my free stuff. I was like, I don't need you to pay me. Yeah. What I desire to create in the world is a place and a different possibility for people to be able to be them.
Yeah.
And I also want them to be able to find this. And so the more stuff that I put out into the world, the more of a possibility there is that somebody will find a tool that will change their life, that will give them more space to be. That's what I desire to create. That's all. And I do happen to make more money the more I do that. So are those two linked?
Boom.
Maybe. Whatever.
Yeah, I love it. And it struck me once, Gary said once, you know, you can't steal consciousness. And by the same token, you can't hoard it and you can't own it. It's just there. And, you know, everyone is going to get what they're going to get when they are going to get it, and from whom they're going to get it, or from where, or from what thing or entity they're going to get it. And so, it's that thing of like, okay, yeah, you could go, I mean, you could listen to Dr. Dane Heer's Tour of Consciousness videos and get every key nugget from from thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of classes, and never even go into a class. And then you can also choose to go into the class and be in the energy with all the people that are there. And, and that's also, that creates something as well. But yeah, it's that, I love that what you're saying, and that thing of like, we create this, and then, we each, so you and me and everyone else, and, we're all doing that in our own different ways. And then how we engage with one another is going to be different. So, when you and I have a conversation about a tool or about, a possibility, it's going to be different than, you and another person, or you or two other people entirely, even if it's around the same tool. So what people may receive, can be different on any given day. So when people come to you, we've actually talked a lot about access consciousness. It doesn't always come up this much on shows, but for people who are I know there are a lot of people watching that are very familiar, and then some who, as this trickles out into the world, it may be new to them, and it may seem a little weird. So did it ever seem a little weird to you, or was it always just? Yeah, no, cool.
No, it's weird.
Weird, right?
It's really, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in my first bars session, she did the bars on me, which I briefly mentioned, but it's 32 points on your head where when you lightly touch them, dissipates thought.
Yeah.
Okay, that shouldn't work, but it does.
Yeah.
And then the clearing statement, right, wrong, good, bad, pod, poc, all nine shorts, boys and beyonds. It has a whole website attached to it, theclearingstatement.com, if you are baffled. Is just bizarre. Again, shouldn't work. But it just did. And that was the thing that really hooked me about access consciousness tools and the body of work that is this whole weird, thing, is they just worked. Yeah. And my biggest thing was I had done so much psychotherapy and so much psychiatry. Like my childhood was rough. So I had been in the system in the United States, social work system for sexual abuse and in and out of court, and so my whole life had been sort of wrapped up in trying to heal from this thing that was done to me. And then it turns out my mom was insane, so there's all this other there was just a lot of I had a lot of stuff. And so I had done a lot of work. Yeah. And the thing that always frustrated me is that it never seemed to stick. The change that we'd create, or the thing that I felt better about after the session, seemed to go back to the way it was. Yeah. And what really struck me, there's two things that really struck me about the access consciousness tools. One, it didn't revert. Whatever it was we changed stayed different. And I could tell just based on the way I was living my life. And two, it was so fast. I'm like, you shouldn't be able to create lasting change that fast, but apparently you can.
Yeah. Yeah, weird.
So sign me up. Where do I sign up? And I literally changed the whole trajectory of my life to go be a certified facilitator because of those things. And I'd been asking for something that would work with people and assist them, or whatever that word was for me at the time, in changing their lives. I was looking to make a difference. And so that sold me. Sign me up. I don't care how weird it is. If it works like that, it can be, paint me blue and send me out in the world. I don't care.
That's awesome. And what this really is for me too, it's this real example. You're talking about being a rebel creator, and that's sort of coming in and out of our discussion. And it's like there's also this energy of, like, you just mentioned very briefly, your upbringing, your past, right? And even you're not supposed to be happy, Christel. You're not supposed to have succeeded. You're not supposed to be happy. It's not actually supposed to be like this for you because of what you experienced and what you went through. So you've been a complete rebel in that sense too, of not participating in what was supposed to be your future.
I know, I'm terrible. I'm a terrible person.
How dare you?
You're right. I know. I was having a conversation with a friend the other day, and he was like, I am so just thankful that you are the way you are today. Because, just finding out information about, and if you met my mom, she's a mess. She like hoards things and gets hauled into jail for bench warrants because she doesn't show up for court because she got a ticket for 7 dogs. And she's got, she's like the classic TLC case of all the things. And then you've got me, and I look and I put us side by side, and I'm like, this should not be. I don't. If you'd met me 5 years ago, I was better. I was better than maybe that, but I was really struggling. I didn't know how to make it any better than that. Like, how do you get past, $3,000 a month, for example, as an income was my ceiling, and that changed from 1,200, and 3,000 was a lot. And I had all these ceilings that I couldn't move, or I didn't know how to move, or I'd heard, if you go get a degree and you go do this thing, you can do that thing, but that doesn't sound fun, and
Yeah.
it was just on and on and on and on. And I was like, how do you do this? Like, so to find this and to be able to actually use it to create something else was really a miracle.
Yeah. And, the other thing that I hear in this is, you being the rebel is really just you being willing to choose it your way, and to not be looking outside of yourself for what you should be doing, but actually to say, no, that's actually not going to work for me. I don't actually like what that plan looked like, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it and choose it this way. And I'm not exactly sure how it's going to turn out and where I'm going to end up, but I know it's not that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be.
I have to take you near my power cord because my phone's going to die.
Well, it's great lighting, honey. You look fabulous. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's, I think, the thing about Access Consciousness is it actually empowers you to have your own way. I don't know anything else that does that,
Yeah.
Therapy, counseling, a lot of the other modalities do that thing where it's like, well, do this series of steps, or say these things, or communicate in that way, and then you'll have what you're asking for. And the thing was, I tried all, it's like I tried all that, and it didn't ever create what I was asking for. Yeah. So I was like, okay, well, Access is saying that I know. So what do I know about this? And that actually invites you, if you're willing, to ask a question of yourself. And it turns out that questions that are true questions, which is all that means, is that they're actually curious, are what they are the things that empower you. They're the things that invite the universe to give you that information. Mm-hmm. They're the things that unhide what you're actually brilliant at. The questions create, choice creates. And I think a lot of this stuff we're really good at and don't know we're good at it. That was a lot of what I discovered with Access, was like, turned out I kind of lived a lot of my life like this, but I was so busy making myself wrong for it that I couldn't see it. Yeah. And I also didn't know how to consciously use any of it. I was just sort of accidentally being awesome, but not knowing that, so there was a lot of that, like, where I was like, oh, well, if I can accidentally be awesome, like, what would it be like to be consciously awesome,
Yeah. Well, and a big part of this too is dialing up our capacity to be aware. So with that, we become aware of maybe a lot of things that we didn't want to be aware of, maybe the things that are a little sticky and prickly, or stinky even. And we become aware of all of the things that have gone unacknowledged, right? All those strengths. And especially, we know lots of times, the funny thing is that lots of things that we've made ourselves wrong for can actually be our superpower that we've just been judging the bejesus out of, and kind of, warping into something kind of weird instead of actually just choosing it. So allowing your, whatever you've decided your wrongness is, poking around a little bit to see where is it actually a strongness, and where can we actually begin to open up and acknowledge that. So, there's that whole acknowledgement piece, that as we're becoming more and more aware of things, that we also acknowledge the things that are working, and that we have been consciously creating, and that we, that there is more, like there's always the unfolding piece that's at play as well. There's always also the becoming piece. So there are these things that we are already being that we can acknowledge, and then there's also those fun things that we are still in the process of becoming, and that we can continue to nurture and to invite in more and more. So I know we're getting close to our hour. What else, is there anything else that you would like to bring into this conversation? I didn't actually say the title, right? Are you a rebel? Are you a rebel creator trying to be ... not that? So as we've been talking, for those of you watching, are there places where, maybe you have not been willing to rebel from, the script kind of, what you should be, or what you think you should be, or others think you should be, or what you've been choosing. And how much energy is going into resisting being that rebel creator that you truly be somewhere in there. So Christel, for all of the emergent rebel creators that are here today and in the future, what else can we offer to assist in that coaxing out process and the watering of that seedling?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the first thing I just want to add is that rebel creator is a little bit of a misnomer, in that, a rebel, as far as this reality goes, has to resist and has to do the opposite from. What I'm inviting all of us to look at and choose is, what's the way of creating, what are the ways of creating that actually really work for you? The thing about the way life works for you, or the way business works for you, is that it doesn't look like anybody else's, and it's not something anyone else can validate or acknowledge for you. It is only something that you can know and that you can choose. And it's also something that you're going to get to discover. So it's not like you'll just have one knowing one time and all of a sudden your life will start working. It's something that, this being willing to be a rebel creator is being willing to use tools that maybe other people don't use, so that you can access what it is that you know, and what it is you'd like to choose, and what it is that truly works for you, and what it is that creates the world you want to live in. And that could seem like a big question, but I know, as a rebel creator, as me, I'm like, I was only ever inspired by the big questions.
Yeah.
It was only the bigger questions that actually invited me out of and into a way of being in the world that made me happy. So ask bigger too. Like, wonder what you could institute and create that would create a different world. What you're already being that's doing that. What you could turn up, dial up, that would create that even more. And you might find that as you ask those things and ask of yourself those things, that you get access to a whole universe of energies that empower you to begin moving in a direction that really does truly make you deeply, deeply happy.
Yeah. And I love that. What's the world that you'd like to live in? And, and it's really not about changing anyone else as much as really looking at where am I giving my power away? Where am I putting my energy, or using my energy in areas that actually aren't really fun? Maybe I'm going through the motions in some part of my life, or, I'm doing things out of duty and obligation. And, okay, maybe you choose some of that for certain things, but is it 100% of what you're choosing? Is that working? Is that actually creating a world that you'd like to live in? And even if you can't today, in this moment, change everything in the world and how everyone is showing up, what can you change today that, that makes your world as you're living in it that little bit different? And knowing too that, what works for you, when you're looking at what's my way, knowing that your way, it doesn't mean one way forever, right? We talked about that one big choice forever. And it's also in the way things work. What works for you, what works for you today, it may not be the way it works for you tomorrow. And just having that softness and that space to recognize that you're always looking for the way that works, but that way is also going to be fluid. Yeah. So, so taking, you know, taking what you can from those around you and maybe trying things and saying, oh yeah, this works. And then also recognizing that when it doesn't work anymore, you know, that you can put it on the shelf. Maybe it'll work someday in the future again. But you don't have to stay with it forever either. Yeah.
And I like just add, like, this is a massive topic. This creation of your life is like, you know, this is a 60-minute show. It's not like you're going to come out of this show with like every single thing you require. I'd really invite you.
What would it take?
You know, whether it's access consciousness or something else, like dive into the pool of the thing that you just know is going to create the change for you that you can't explain. You know, whether that's the books. I mean, I can't talk enough about the books of access consciousness, the classes. The bars and foundation are the two key core classes of access that are some of the biggest game-changing things you could possibly choose, you know. So there's so many different resources of like, what is it that you'd like to change? What is it that you know can be different? What can you go after that would create that difference for you? What difference are you already that if you begin to acknowledge it would change what's already occurring, and what choices do you have available to you now?
Yeah. And what are some of the titles? So if someone is like, well, which books do you like the best? You know, what are some of the titles that starting out that that inspired you the most, or that, you know, began to open up this in your world?
Well, I'd say as a general overall book, Being You, Changing the World by Dr. Dane Heer is probably just a handbook for living. And if for more specific things, like if you're really struggling with your relationship, pick up Divorceless Relationships. I was having many relationship problems, and Gary said, you need to make that book your Bible. So I did.
Yeah, and even just your relationship with yourself, right? Because there's sort of a twist to it. It's really just, what are you being? So.
Yeah. But I didn't want to know that in the beginning. I was just trying to fix the relationship. It turns out you're the problem. But anyway, read the book. But then if you're really struggling with money's not the problem. You are. It's epic. There's many money tools. I would start there. If you are really struggling with just, there's just so many different things. Home of Infinite Possibilities, Beyond the Utopian Ideal. I think I'm breaking up.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, you're good. And I will put links to those that she mentioned. So if you want to check those out, you can. So awesome. So Christel, we are getting to the top of the hour. Well, actually the bottom of the hour, or however that works. We're somewhere. And so before we wrap, is there anything else that you'd like to share in terms of people finding you, things that you'd like to invite them to, any last words of wisdom?
I think I've said it all. I mean, if you'd like more, I have a lot of free resources on my website. So you can go to ChristelJoyCrawford.com, ChristelJoy Crawford.com. And there's lots of free stuff on there, including just a 6-video tour through my favorite access consciousness tools. There's body stuff and money stuff and business stuff. So just check it out. And I have a YouTube channel that's chock full of information and tools and videos too.
And all of those links will definitely be in the show notes. So you will have plenty to click away on, and you will have more Christel than you ever thought possible at your fingertips. And you might see her somewhere in the world. Yeah. Cool. And I saw that you're going to be in the land of my people in September, Austria, for a foundation.
Oh, yeah.
Co-facilitating with Stephanie.
Be all over the world. Stephanie and I are doing a lot of foundation classes. I'm doing a lot of foundation classes all over North America, Austria, Switzerland, Brazil, Asheville, North Carolina, all over.
Awesome.
So just check. You can find all that on the website as well.
Cool. Well, thank you for taking this, this time to be with us, to spend time with us. Everyone who's been watching, thank you so much. I've been watching. I didn't see any specific questions, but I see a lot of hand clapping and kisses and wonderful little emojis. So thank you for being here live. Hearts flying, love those. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Christel, thank you for joining us. For those of you who've been with us all season, or for those of you who just joined today for the first time, this is the season finale for season 3. So we are going to be taking a break from the live shows until September. So the first weekend in September, we will start back here. We have a great show already planned for that first Friday of the month of September, and a whole nother season coming up. Over the summer, we will have bits and pieces that will hopefully keep you reminded to know what you know, and to keep choosing, and to play with the choices that you're making. If you like the show, please do like the Facebook page, The Art of Creation Show. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Get all the new shows as soon as they are loaded. And as always, if you have any comments, any feedback, any guests that you would like to see on the show, please let us know. And as we're wrapping up the season, if you have any feedback from this season, anything you'd like to see more of, anything you'd like to see less of, or anything else, yeah, PM us, let us know. And we are so grateful to have you on this journey with us. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for playing. Happy choosing. I wonder what you will choose over the summer, and I wonder what we'll discover next. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everyone.